Can we get on then to the substantive item before us, team, which is agenda item 7, the proposed cycle superhighway schemes. Leon is going to introduce this item.
If we could just deal with
but first, I'm going to ask Howard to say something about the process.
If I could just deal with 2 procedural issues, that would be really kind. A number of board members potentially have a conflict of interest in relation to this issue because they hold positions in organisations who've responded to the very extensive consultation exercise that was undertaken. And I provided some general advice to members yesterday in relation to the position. The view that it's a personal matter for board members to take a view about conflicts of interest. Particularly because that's the legal position, but also TfL is not necessarily aware of the extent to which an organisation holds views, how trenchantly those views are, and what it may be thinking about doing in relation to any decision that the board may take. So it's a personal decision for board members. Our view, though, is that simply holding a position in an organisation that has provided a response to that consultation exercise does not of itself give you a conflict of interest in relation to this issue. However, and there has been some speculation in the press in terms of organisations who may be thinking about legal action, judicial review, etc. in relation to this decision. Heaven forbid. But organisations who are in that position, I think anybody who holds a significant post in such an organisation, it really does need to think quite seriously about whether or not to declare an interest in relation to this matter. If it were the case that there was anybody who was going to declare such an interest, then it would be possible, subject to the approval of the meeting, for us to close the meeting and allow that person or persons to say something informally about their own organisation's views or their personal views about the matter. But in terms of participating in the deliberation of the board's consideration of this matter and participating in a closed session that there might be, although I'm not anticipating it on this item, then that person wouldn't take part in that way. So, having said that, the question is...
Can I confess to being a bit fogged by that?
Yes.
Broadly speaking, are you saying, Howard, that everybody can take part in the discussion?
Except for anybody who is
who feels conflicted.
Who feels conflicted,
right?
And in particular, I think if they hold a senior position in an organisation that might be thinking about taking legal proceedings in relation to this matter. I'm not saying they have to have decided that or taken final advice, but I think if they think now that they could be in that position, then it wouldn't be appropriate to take part in the deliberation on this item. But that's a personal decision.
Okay, so the feelings of internal conflict are to be assessed and evaluated by individuals sitting around the table now. And if they don't feel internally conflicted, then they can yes. participate. Right. Okay. Daniel.
I apologise for being a couple of minutes late, not for not being here when the declarations were done, but just in the context, can I declare my membership of the Royal Borough of Kensington Chelsea Council, which has submitted a response. I wasn't consulted on it. And having carefully considered the matter, I don't consider that I have a conflict of interest.
Okay. John.
Just for being late, Chairman. I was Chairman of National Express, and therefore an organisation
everybody's got
large
some
number
sort
of
of
vehicles
issue.
on the road. I'm not aware that certainly I'm not aware at all that we have any intention of taking any legal position on this. We've not actually had any debates about any significant response on this. I don't think we've actually put in any significant response whatsoever. So I personally don't feel conflicted.
You're okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, John. Encouraging Peter.
I don't feel I'm conflicted at all, but Howard has suggested a remedy or a compromise that I'm happy to take up, which is similar to what we did the last time in relation to the taxis, is to adjourn the meeting for a short period of time. I would make some remarks, and then you would restart the meeting, and I wouldn't participate in the discussion or the vote. So, as I said, I don't feel I have a conflict. Howard and I disagree on this point, but not to disrupt.
I think the ruling seems to be that if you don't feel it, you don't have it.
I understand.
It's a little less 1960s.
I have agreed with Howard. I have agreed with Howard to compromise.
Okay, look,
in everybody's interest, that probably makes sense.
Okay, look, I think we're all grown ups here. Why don't we crack on? Why don't we crack on with the? Sorry, Bob. Does Bob want to say anything? No.
Well, I consider I probably am conflicted, possibly even afflicted, because it is likely that we will run a JR if necessary, but there's no decision being taken yet.
Right.
Can I suggest
well,
that?
I'm going to go on.
I was just going to suggest then that we take the presentation
Yeah.
that's going to be given and that, but then we pause, suspend the meeting, allow anybody who wishes to say something personally to say something, and then we reopen the meeting and take Paul's deliberation.
My feeling is the presentation will be of such power and beauty that all sensations of conflict will be resolved and melt away. So,
and if I may on a second issue, the TfL has received a number of letters in the last couple of days where the authors of those letters have asked us to pass those letters on to board members relating to this item. We have passed on all of those letters, and there are hard copies of them on the table in front of you, just in case anybody's not had a chance to read them, and we will be making those letters publicly available after the meeting.
Thanks very much, Howard. Okay, I think over to Leon.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, 1 second. Leon. Sorry, Michael.
Sorry to reopen if it's been closed, but I'm just reading the email that Howard sent around, and it does say the Greater London Authority Act 1999, Schedule 10, paragraph 13(1) requires that if you have any issue, blah, 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 not in any manner that is brought up for consideration, must not take part in any deliberation or decision. So this business of closing the meeting and then having a chat and then reopening it surely is deliberation. So I'm just interested. I just want to make sure.
You've got a legal challenge here, Howard. I think we need to calm Michael down.
Point of order. No. I think the logic is this: that so long as the board closes the meeting, allows individuals to convey any views that they have personally, and then reopens the meeting, and then holds its deliberation without those individuals taking part in the discussion of that. In that stage of the meeting, and also in the event that there was the need for a closed part of that discussion, those people would leave the room. Then in that situation, I think our standing orders are complied with.
Brilliant. This is rather like how the Belgians were able to pass a law on abortion in spite of the conscientious objections of King Baudouin. He briefly stepped down from the throne in order to allow the law to be passed. I think that's roughly what we're going to do. Okay. Should we crack on, Leon?
Thank you very much. There's a presentation here, so the front row may need to...
Come on, yeah.
So, as members know, we, at a previous board meeting, showed and had approved the cycling vision for London. What we're doing today is part of the cycling vision for London, and what we're seeking today, specifically, is £95 million worth of additional project authority for the commitments which are described in the papers that you have and which this presentation attempts to bring to life. So firstly, just to say that... This is hoping.
Last black need to go. It's a black hole.
Thank you. So this is just what cycling today looks like. This is part of the East-West Cycle Superhighway as it is today. This is a cyclist eye view. And this is just demonstrating the terrible conflict that exists between cyclists and all other road users. You'll see here having to cope with parked vehicles, having to park with several lanes of traffic. And you'll see shortly just how close cyclists and other traffic come into really close proximity. And as you can see here, this particular cyclist just being forced between double-decker sightseeing bus, trying to make some progress through there, and then swarms of cyclists across all lanes of the carriageway, making their way, as you can see. Very shortly we're going to see, as the cyclists in this coach make the right turn, how the cyclists are squeezed between a heavy vehicle and the security cordon that exists around the side of the Houses of Parliament. All this are the sorts of reasons why we have so many killed and seriously injured of cyclists on the roads in inner London. 14 last year, some 475 seriously injured, 70% of those collisions taking place in inner London. So that what we're looking at today, what we're trying to do with segregation for cyclists, is to make a huge improvement for cyclists, a huge improvement in road safety for all road users, and it's about encouraging cycling, it's about saving lives, and it's about making sure that the whole environment is better for everybody. There's £913 million set aside in the budget for cycling during the course of our business plan, and the routes covered on the paper that we've had before you today is designed to attract another 4,000 daily cyclists, and in the morning peak that will make a huge difference to the way in which people get to work in London. So this is the route map that we have of all the cycle superhighways that we are planning. And what we have listed here is what's before you today. Cycle Superhighway 1, the improvements to 2, also, and also, as you can see, east, west and north, south. So this is what the 95 million is covering today. We'll just start with the easy one, which is Cycle Superhighway 1. This is about to go out to consultation. This is from Tottenham to the city, and by not using the main A10, the Cycle Superhighway takes people on quieter roads and will provide a really fast journey for cyclists away from the A10, probably saving cyclists about 12 minutes on this particular journey because it avoids many of the junctions. So this is about to go to consultation and is included in the budget authority that we're seeking today. As we build cycle superhighways, we make the environment so much better. So here's a particularly nasty junction. This is Apex at Shoreditch, which is on Cycle Superhighway 1. This is what it looks like now. This is what it will look like when the Cycle Superhighway has been introduced. Huge improvements to urban realm, huge improvement for pedestrians, of course a much better environment for cyclists, as you can see. We're also working on the existing Cycle Superhighway 2. So this was built some years ago to the existing standards at that time. We're going to upgrade Cycle Superhighway 2 from Bow to Aldgate. Members will recall that we've had more than one fatality and serious injury on Cycle Superhighway 2. And so the plan is to bring Cycle Superhighway 2 up to modern standards. Now, to give you a bit of a flavour from the consultation, when this was out of consultation, there was particular concern from the people at Whitechapel Market, which is this area here, as shown here on the map. Because Whitechapel Market involves effectively street trading, there was great concern that the street traders would not be able to function. As a result of which, we've completely changed the design of this area. The Cycle Superhighway lane is inside a 5-metre wide bus lane. That means, together with some provision that we've made for loading and unloading, that Whitechapel Market can continue as normal. The cyclists have still got their dedicated cycle lane, and the rest of the area will continue to function. So Cycle Superhighway 2 looks like this at the moment. It's blue paint in the near side lane on this particular section between Aldgate and Bow. Transformed, it now has segregated cycleways on both sides of the road, segregated from the ordinary traffic, and big improvements to all of the junctions. So our new proposal on Cycle Superhighway 5, the intersection, that's between Pimlico and Oval. Again, this has been out to consultation, and once more we have a situation where, as a result of all of the consultation responses, we've gone back and done a major change to the design. The particular area of concern shown here in Harleyford Road, and on the original arrangement, you can see the Cycle Superhighway was on the north side of the road. This caused some difficulties to do with bus stops, also to do with the junction. So as a result of all of the consultation and the replanning of the work by the team, we've now moved the Cycle Superhighway segregated section to the south side of the road. This now means there are fewer junctions in which to deal with. Things are improved, of course, for the buses, and makes for a far better scheme than the one that was previously indicated. Another feature of Cycle Superhighway 5 Inner is, of course, across Vauxhall Bridge. This is what Vauxhall Bridge looks like at the moment. As you can see, the cyclists are mixed up with the general traffic. There's a bus lane in the middle of Vauxhall Bridge headed south, and an ordinary bus lane in the opposite direction of the curb. And hopefully, what happens with Cycle Superhighway 5 like this is it dives straight into the Vauxhall gyratory system, which we're also planning some improvements for. Miraculously now transformed, a two-way cycle superhighway on one side, the cyclists in both directions, they'll avoid the gyratory at Vauxhall. Life will be safer and simpler for cyclists, and we retain all the traffic lanes in both directions, as you can see here on the bridge as well. So now we come to cycle superhighway north-south. Now this is from Elephant and Castle and is aimed at King's Cross, although the work that we're proposing and we've consulted on is as far as Stonecutter Street. One of the big issues in the consultation for north-south was the problem at Ludgate Circus. So again, as a result of the consultation, we've been back and redesigned Ludgate Circus. We now get, instead of staggered pedestrian crossings, we get better pedestrian crossings for that. The whole operation of Ludgate Circus will work very much better as a result of this redesign here. So one feature of North-South Cycle Superhighway is Blackfriars Road going across Blackfriars Bridge. In the morning peak, cyclists are the majority crossing Blackfriars Bridge. Transformed here, as you can see. Beautiful cycle superhighway, segregated on one side for two-way cyclists, and as you can see, ordinary traffic moved across to the right-hand side. Huge improvement to the area, huge improvement to the traffic flow, improved safety for the cyclists. And then the big issue is the east-west cycle superhighway, which plugs into CS3 at Tower Hill and is projected to go all the way out to Westway. The bit that we're really talking about today is the section from Tower Hill to Parliament Square. The alignment through the park and so on is still yet to be done, and we'll be reconsulting on the arrangements at Lancaster Gate. As you can see, huge amount of connectivity on this. It meets the north-south cycle superhighway at Blackfriars Bridge, and it also connects into various other arrangements for cyclists, as you can see on here as well. This is what Parliament Square looks like at the moment. And as you can see, it's an urban motorway in the form of a roundabout outside the Houses of Parliament. And when we transform the arrangements here, life will be much better for all road users, including cyclists. As you can see, the cyclists now have a direct route across the side here of Parliament Square between the Royal Parks and Bridge Street. So as a result of the consultation, we've made lots of changes to the cycle superhighway. And the principal changes we made were between Tower Hill and down to Westminster Bridge. The principal advantage that we've made in the changes that we've made since the consultation is to re-establish 2 lanes from Tower Hill through to Northumberland Avenue. In the original presentation, it was 1 lane. We've found an engineering way now of making 2 lanes. So that means that the delays that were previously being encountered on the approach to Tower Hill have been seriously improved from some 15 plus minutes on that section down to just 6. We've been able to restore 1 or 2 of the banned turns that were previously not going to be possible. We've made some changes in the way in which the loading and unloading is taking place at Temple. We're going to ban the right turn out of Northumberland Avenue onto the embankment. Hardly anybody does that, as a result of which we can give traffic on the embankment a longer green signal time, which improves, again, the traffic flow. And right at the end, at Parliament Square, again, some changes in order to make sure that traffic coming off the end of the embankment can flow out more freely. These are the changes to the delays. So you previously saw in the original consultation, these are delay minutes and seconds. So the amount of delay, so a positive number is a delay, that's bad. A negative number is a journey time improvement. And as you can see, as I've just said, that whole section from Limehouse Link to Hyde Park Corner, it was nearly 16 minutes in the original plan, is down to 6 minutes 13 seconds. That's easily the worst of the delays. And as you can see, in italics, see Smithfield to St Margaret Street, which is a subset of the one above, actually shows that inside the cycle superhighway section, the delay is down to just a fraction under 4 minutes. So this is a tremendous improvement in the delays to general traffic compared with the original proposals. This is yet to go for consultation, but again, to sort of bring this to life, this is the current arrangement as you leave Hyde Park. It will be transformed like this at Lancaster Gate, as you can see now, again, with the cyclists with their own fully segregated area, big improvements at the junction, and it will look beautiful when it's done for sure. So how does all this work? Firstly, the big important thing is our traffic signal strategy. We will be using the traffic signals all the way across London to monitor and control the flow of all traffic approaching the centre of London, to make sure that when it arrives in the centre of London, it is only arriving at the rate that the road network that we've provided can cope with it. This is what we did very successfully during the Olympics. So some people coming in from outer London will suffer some delays as they approach London. When they get into the centre of London, the traffic will flow more freely. So inside the central area of London, we're expecting improvements in the flow of traffic because, as I said, during the Olympics, what we did was to control that flow to make sure that only the traffic that the system could cope with was flowing in the area. We will do much more on enforcement. Quite a lot of the delays that we currently suffer in London are caused by illegally parked vehicles, illegal loading and unloading, and of course also by breakdowns and other issues. So there will be a huge amount of enforcement. We'll be making sure that disruptions to the network get cleared up extremely quickly. There will be targeted enforcement to make sure that there is far less illegal parking, far less illegal loading and unloading. We'll be working very closely with the freight industry, very important to deal with out-of-hours deliveries. What we'll be doing, and we are doing, is to work with the freight and logistics industry to get some of the movements of freight traffic, which currently occupies the peak periods, to move their loading and unloading periods to other times of the day and night, so that we free up some space of the traffic in the centre of London. So our freight strategy is designed to create some space in order to allow some of the reassignment of carriageway space that we have planned. Our travel demand management, which we used successfully during the Olympics and we used successfully ever since, encourages all road users to think about the journey that they're about to make, thinking about which mode of transport to use, what time to do it, and in particular, which route to take. So in terms of thinking that the cycle superhighway segregation will take away road space, some of the traffic that would have used that space won't be there because it will be travelling at another time or it will be travelling to or from another place as a result of the effective travel demand management. That also means we'll be really clear that we are putting out good travel and traffic information all the time to help people make their journeys. There are some effects to the bus services. Those effects are now quite small, but we are making changes to the routes and the numbers of vehicles employed on the bus network in order to mitigate some of the effects of the changes in the traffic flows. In some cases where we can't make those mitigations in the area of the disruption, we will be making mitigations other places on the bus route so that they are compensated for. Where they lose time in one area, we'll get it back through some measures in others. It has been suggested in some of the correspondence that you will have seen that what we really ought to do is to have some sort of trial to see if all this really works on the ground. So I'd really just like to address that strong point which has been made by a number of people. And the reason why we can't run a trial is that whilst it would be technically possible to lay out some railway sleepers and cones and narrow the carriageway to what it would be like if the cycle superhighway was in position, there is no way that we can remodel the junctions and there is no way that we can change all of the traffic signal timings across thousands of sets of signals across London in order to try and simulate the conditions that might exist if the cycle superhighway was in place. And it is very important to understand that the way in which the scheme has been designed is that it all hangs together on all of its elements. It's a combination of the traffic signal timings, the layout of the junctions, the carriageway width, the priorities, the band turns and so on. So it all hangs together. So there isn't a menu of options on East-West Cycle Superhighway where you can pick and choose some of the benefits, because if any of the elements that we have in place are disturbed, then the whole thing comes apart. We think actually the much better thing to do than a trial is to do what we would always do in a case like this, which is to be all over it like a rash operationally. As we make each stage of the construction, we'll be watching the traffic very carefully. As the construction unfolds and more of the cycle superhighway is available and more of the changes to the network are completed, we'll be watching very closely. And if for any reason the behaviour of all road users and the volumes of road users are different to what we predict, then of course we'll immediately stop, reconsider what we have to do and see if we have to make any changes before proceeding. So instead of a trial, what we'll be doing is watching very carefully the effects of the work that we do. And we think this is what we would call continual assessment. So I give you our guarantee that we will be watching the network extremely carefully to see the effects. For what it's worth, given that the modelling is not an absolutely precise science, in general, the traffic modelling that we employ is sometimes very slightly pessimistic. That is to say that the negative effects that you've seen described in the papers and today are never normally quite as bad as that. And that was true when we introduced congestion charging. It was true when we did the Olympic Games in 2012. We were generally pleasantly surprised that the effects were slightly better than we'd predicted. That's a right-side failure. We're very happy with that, and I think that's a useful thing to mention in context. So then we finally just think about where we are with East-West Cycle Superhighway and the changes that we've made as a result of the consultation, which are quite extensive. So I think you might enjoy, I hope you're going to enjoy, that's working, that's good, oops, okay, you are going to enjoy. What we're going to see here now is a fly-through. This is a computer simulation based on the traffic modelling that we are using, and we're going to come in as if you would come in from the east. We're going to be on the highway. We are going to be on the highway. I'm told it's working. Good. So we're now coming in along the highway from the east. We're approaching Tower Hill from the east, and what you're seeing here is a visual impression of the traffic modelling that we used, and it's been used to compile the data that you've seen in the papers. So as you can see, traffic is approaching the centre of London. This is somewhere about 9 o'clock in the typical Monday morning peak. And the first place you get to is the Tower Hill gyratory. And when we get to Tower Hill, as you can see here, that's the Tower of London to your left, Tower Bridge at about 7 o'clock. And as you can see there, 2 traffic lanes now completely restored through past Tower Hill for the westbound traffic. And as you can see at the top, here you can see the Cycle Superhighway just up there at the top, feeding into Cycle Superhighway 3, which starts just over there. So at this point, the Cycle Superhighway is on the north side of the carriageway. It's on the other side of the road to the Tower of London. And that actually means that we have fewer junctions, and we're away from, of course, what's a World Heritage Site. So now we move along to Upper Thames Street. The Cycle Superhighway is still on the north side of the carriageway. And as you can see here in Upper and Lower Thames Street, you've got, again, the Cycle Superhighway, which is over here on the right-hand side. 2 traffic lanes flowing freely. It's flowing freely, of course, because we've only allowed as much traffic into the centre of London as it's able to cope with. Coming up here now with the junction with Southwark Bridge. As you can see from the Cycle Superhighway there, the junction operating correctly for the cyclists. Traffic making the normal turning movements. And one of the reasons why we're restricted, there are foundations for some of the buildings in the centre of the road in Upper Thames Street, so we can't move the carriageway too far. By the time we get to the embankment, the Cycle Superhighway is now on the other side of the road. It's on the side of the river. That's because there's no junctions on that side. We're at Temple Place here, traffic coming out of Temple Place. Cycle Superhighway working along here. 2 traffic lanes headed westbound, plus 1 to turn right into Temple Place. And as you can see, small lay-bys here for loading and unloading for the river traffic and also for coaches. As you can see now, as we work further towards Northumberland Avenue, the right-hand lane shortly will be the right turn into Northumberland Avenue. So we're just coming up now here to the railway bridge at Charing Cross. This is a queue of right-turning traffic at Northumberland Avenue. It's about the same queue as we have now, and the traffic going straight on for Parliament Square is here. Scoot round to the other side of the railway bridge. There's the Northumberland Avenue turning. No right turn allowed from here, so all this traffic is turning left. Right turning traffic into Northumberland Avenue flowing here, and then down to Parliament Square. And at Parliament Square, what we have here, we're looking down now from just about Big Ben, which is just there. And as you can see, what's happening is there's 1 lane of traffic here and the cyclists. Here are the cyclists dealing with this junction. They're crossing across onto the Cycle Superhighway, which is now just alongside Big Ben. And then as that flow finishes, the cyclists there start to move. We move down to Parliament Square, and here are the cyclists. The cyclists come from the park across here, have their own lane just here. They're now waiting at these signals here for this traffic to change. As they wait, the traffic from Whitehall releases, so that keeps Parliament Square flowing absolutely freely. And when it's their turn, when the traffic at Whitehall finally comes to a halt, then the cyclists here are released. You'll see them move, and the cyclists will start to cross from left to right. There they go. Across into Parliament Square.
You say that's 9 o'clock on a Monday morning?
It is. It's 9 o'clock on a Monday to Friday morning.
I didn't see Father Christmas there.
That's so, that's, I hope, brings to life what the papers are describing on the Cycle Superhighway programme. Really very important that we make provision now for cyclists who are, as I said earlier, to some extent are the greater number of vehicles on our roads in the morning peak, and with all the benefits to health and exercise, traffic congestion and air quality that cycling brings with us. I'm sure there'll be some questions. I have my top team of Patrick Doig, Alan Bristow, Helen Kanzik and Nigel Hardy here to answer any specific technical questions. That's been my team that has not only designed the original scheme, but ploughed through all of the consultation and made all of the changes that has brought us to the version that we've got. We think that this is the best scheme that we can deliver. It is tempting to say that we should have some more debate and some more consultation, and we should do some more work, and we should have some more ideas on the table. It is our belief that in the physical constraints that we currently have, we have done all that we can now possibly do to deliver a scheme that's balanced like this one. So on that basis, our preference is that we get on now and deliver this scheme, and I commend it to the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leon. Well, thank you. And I think that gets over what we're trying to do very, very clearly and powerfully. This isn't just about making cycling safer, it's about making London more attractive as a place to live and work, and boosting what is the cleanest, greenest, most effective form of, most environmentally friendly form of transport. And I think that the modifications you've been able to introduce to the East-West scheme in particular are very welcome. I think obviously it will be a job of work to get it in, but once it is in, I think it will be of huge, huge benefit to the city. All those schemes will be of benefit to the city, and I think actually, looking at them, we should start thinking about more such cycle superhighways across the city, because there are plenty of other areas I think would benefit from them. Now, any questions or comments that people wish to make in any guise? What's
Should we suspend the meeting, allow a couple of people to...
If we suspend the meeting, do we have to invite the press and the public to depart? Or okay, all right. Okay, so we're going to introduce this brilliant doctrine. Okay, we're going to auto suspend the meeting, and but then when do you want to resume the meeting?
As soon as the two people who wish to speak.
As soon as the two people who wish to speak have finished, then the meeting will be considered resumed.
Sorry, Howard, can I just clarify? Basically, what we're not supposed to have is a discussion, is that right? So
Yes.
the two people need to make their statements, but we can't have responsive
No
discussion with the
deliberation
board.
of this matter, and this is not a formal part of the meeting. It's two individuals making points that they wish to...
Okie dokie. Come on then. Okay. Well, let's proceed on that basis.
Well,
so who wants to kick off?
I'll be
Bob?
brief, Chair, so
Yes.
I'll kick off. I really only have one comment, but I feel it sums up all of my concerns. And that is that at the 11th hour, quite amazingly in my view, the planners have completely redesigned several of the vital junctions. What they've done, they've actually doubled the road space available to non-cyclists. They've doubled it, not tweaked it, they've doubled it. Now, if they got it that wrong the first time round, it leaves me with no confidence whatsoever in any of their other models or predictions, and that's about it.
Right. Okay. Well, it seems to me that what that shows is I tend to think that it shows the ingenuity and brilliance of TfL traffic engineers, that they've been able to extort quite so much road space out of our network, and I think they've done a fantastic job. But I think obviously your point is well made and well taken, and we will maybe that Leon has an answer to that.
Only to say it was not halved in the first place, therefore it was not doubled in the revision.
Right. Okay. Anyway.
Just clarification, Chair. It was going to be one lane in the proposals, now it's two.
Which is fantastic.
For example, Puddle Dock on the embankment. So that sounds like a doubling to me.
Yeah, but you're assuming that it was the same all the way from end to end, which of course it isn't.
No, I mentioned the vital junctions.
Sure, but the point is that, as I say, it wasn't halved, therefore, in the reiteration, it hasn't been doubled. We have found a way, by narrowing footways, narrowing traffic lanes, and indeed narrowing the cycle superhighway, to get some more traffic volume through and deal with the particular concern, which was that unacceptable 16-minute delay coming in from Line House.
Terrific. Thank you. I think we're not going to be having discussion now, so we're going to hear from Peter, I think.
I have a couple of points to make. I think the first one is just for the record to say that the way that this cycling superhighway has come to the committee is inconsistent with the normal corporate governance of TfL. Normally, this would have gone through Surface Panel, it would have gone through the Finance and Policy Committee, and board members would have had a chance to review, look at it, debate it, make their comments, and we bypassed the normal procedures of the board. I would also point out that we got all of this, a vast amount of data, I guess with a view of getting all the data out there just last week. And I think what is interesting to me is the number of letters that have been sent in by very important and powerful organizations. I mean, you have people who are directly affected by this, and there's a theme that goes through all of these letters, which is you are rushing this through. There is not appropriate consultation. Each of the letter writers is asking for consultation with them for their particular issues. And they're also saying that the data wasn't forthcoming in time to make a decision, and they are saying that they would like further discussions to address their specific requirements. I think the most important paper that came in is from the Met Police, who raised a whole host of issues that are very, very important and need consideration. I think the other issue is that you have doubled the capacity of the westbound, but we have maintained single-lane traffic along the eastbound. On the eastbound route, you have a lot of businesses, you have a lot of deliveries that need to be made, and what you're creating is a single lane of traffic, which isn't going to be sufficient for the amount of traffic that needs to go down that road. You've also introduced a contraflow. You no longer have barriers between the east and the west, and this is mentioned by the Met Police, and this is a very significant change to the east-west superhighway. Now, Leon himself...
So a cycle contraflow or a vehicular contraflow?
Vehicular contraflow. Now, what Leon has stated in his presentation that we have made extensive changes to the east-west. And my view is that we should listen to the letters. We should properly consult on this to look at the issues that have arisen. We also need to look at the fact that each of the cycling superhighways on page 65, 5.3, have a positive cost-benefit analysis, but the east-west superhighway, for $38 million of expenditure, generates a $200 million negative disbenefit. I don't think the board has ever approved any scheme, be it on an underground or surface or anything, that generates the disbenefit that is 6 times the expenditure, and or that order of magnitude. So my view is what we should do is we should take a step back. We should go through a consultation. We should respond to all of the letters and the respondents. We should see if we can't improve it. And yes, we should trial it. And I don't accept that you can dismiss that we can't trial it at all, because the principal issue, the principal problem with this scheme is the single lane going east and this contraflow. And there are elements of the scheme that you could quite easily trial to see what the impacts are. My final point is the film is very nice, and I agree with colleagues that it doesn't really represent Monday at 9 o'clock. The amount of traffic on that video I don't think is really consistent with the actual traffic. But what it does show is that you are severely limiting the amount of traffic onto the east-west superhighway. And the issue is not what is the traffic that's going to be on the east-west superhighway, because you're preventing it from getting there. You're gating it. What are the implications off of the cycling superhighway? Where does all this traffic back up to? What rat runs get started? How do people cope with it? What actually happens off of the route? And that's what all of these letters are about. When you talk about people making deliveries and you're talking about the Freight Transport Association and everybody else, Their concern is what happens off of the route. And the suggestion is that if there is so much congestion that drivers can't get through their rounds, they may have to put additional lorries on the roads because the drivers will time out. I'm not sure that your data captures that. I'm not sure that the data that's been provided shows the congestion off of the route. And I think that it isn't enough, it isn't sufficient to just say, well, the East-West Superhighway will work. What we have to look at is a holistic approach as to what are the knock-on effects. And I think you've rushed it through. I don't think we've gone through the normal procedures that we normally would. I don't think that we have consulted properly on the new extensively revised scheme. And I think that we have to address how is it that we're approving something with such a huge cost disbenefit, 200 million cost disbenefit, which I personally think is probably light. So,
right. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, right. Well, thank you very much, Peter, and thank you, Bob. I think we're having heard those statements. We will now reconvene the meeting if that's all right. And I think that, speaking from my own knowledge of the responses to the scheme that you refer to, Peter, my impression is that the police, you repose a lot of your argument on the objections, as you put it, of the Metropolitan Police Service. I have a briefing here from the police that they support these proposals, which they believe will significantly improve safety for cyclists, particularly at the many junctions on the routes. I think that is very important and telling, and I do not detect any opposition from the Metropolitan Police. And I think it's curious that should be advanced as an objection. You also note that various bodies and commercial interests have been writing, and that is indeed true. Some of them have left the references to the Canary Wharf response on their letterhead accidentally. And so I congratulate the Canary Wharf on the solidity of the campaign that they've been running against this, and I understand the concerns. I do feel very strongly, though, that you have been successful, and that a great many of the objections that have been raised by Canary Wharf over the last few months have been met, and TfL have worked incredibly hard to address the concerns about delays. I think the point about vehicular contraflow, I'm sure that we have a simple answer to that. I think there's been a very substantial reduction in delay, and this will represent a massive improvement for cycling and for the general quality of life in London. I think it would be very sad if we were to try to stop it going ahead through legalistic processes of one kind or another. I can imagine that people might be tempted to do that. I don't think it will be ultimately successful. These are schemes that have huge public support, overwhelming public support from a London that wants to see safer cycling, and I think we can do it without substantially disadvantaging other users of the road network, and indeed in some cases they are able to make their journeys more speedily. Is there anything, Leon, you want to say in particular about the contraflow argument? Because I don't think, and on the point about the environmental, about the benefits versus the disbenefits, I think that the benefits are, there are massive benefits from this scheme in getting more people on bikes, in boosting the health of Londoners, in improving air quality and making this a more attractive city. That is what we are trying to do. That's what TfL is devoted to achieving. And I think these cycle superhighways will help to do it. Leon, do you want to say something about the contraflow?
Only just to say that there are some parts of the schemes where the detailed design work is not yet completely finalised. A number of these will be subject to a road safety audit in any case. But so the scheme is not absolutely frozen at this time because we're, as you said, asking for project authority today. We're still having some discussions with a number of people over some of the detailed elements of this. And clearly, as part of the road safety audit that the schemes will have to go through, if there are any areas where there are concerns about particular bits of the scheme
those will be exposed in the road safety audit review.
Thank you. And on the whole point about I can't seriously believe that we can accept that the consultation has been rushed. This has been going on for ages. I mean, we have had endless. We've had 20,000 responses. We've gone over this again and again and again, and I think really we ought to get on with it. I accept the argument that in an ideal world it might be possible to test the effects of the scheme in advance. I hear what you say, Peter, about that. There are two difficulties. The first is that, as Leon says, you can put sleepers in the carriageways and you can cone it all off and you can pretend that you've got the effect of the cycle superhighway, but you can't do all the junctions and the traffic lights and all the other interventions that you'd need in order to replicate what it was like. And secondly, I fear that were you to inaugurate such a trial, I'm afraid it would be the victim. It is well possible that such a trial would be the victim of gaming by road users who wanted to affect the outcome in one way or the other. And it doesn't take too much imagination to see how that might be affected. So I don't think that what we're trying to get over is that we feel that the particular objections of great commercial interest in the eastern end of the city, let me put it that way, have been well listened to and reflected in the changes to this scheme. And what we intend to do is to go forward with a programme of simultaneous evaluation, monitoring, reflection and assessment about how we are doing, which will be communicated instantly to all interested parties in such a way as to allow us to check that what we are achieving is not as deleterious to the interests of London and London businesses as some people might fear. And I really don't believe it will be, and I really think that we can manage this change. I believe very strongly that sometimes great cities have to do things that are a little bit difficult and that are received without universal acclaim to begin with. Sometimes if you want to improve the quality of life in a fantastic city like London, you have to do something that is a little bit painful to begin with. I think this is one of those schemes. I think these cycle superhighways come into that category. I think in 5 years' time, when they are in, people will love them, and there will be people won't imagine how we lived without them. And I hope very much that the board, on that basis, will support these proposals. Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As is known, I hold no particular candle for the Cycle Brigade, and indeed have criticised them and their methods on a number of occasions within this board. But can I say I wholly and totally agree with you. There are times when cities have to make bold decisions which takes them into the future, and I believe that these cycle superhighways, the decision on them is one of those decisions, and I certainly will be supporting it today. However, there are a number of questions that clearly have to be posed and asked simply to ensure, one, it is delivered effectively and it doesn't strangle, or they don't strangle London and its economy in the process of their building, and two, that when they are there, they actually work effectively. I think the presentation gave a beautiful artist's impression. If the traffic in London was like it is on that film, then we don't need cycle superhighways, and I'd happily drive into London and indeed pay a congestion charge in a place where there was clearly no congestion. I think it was naive and perhaps gave the wrong impression. But then artists' impressions always paint the most glorious position.
I think the queue for the right turn into Northumberland Avenue was, if anything, slightly longer than you would normally expect. And I speak as somebody who sees that queue every week, and I know it intimate.
Part of the square was devoid of traffic.
No, well, it very often is, by the way. So as I cycle around, so I thought it was looked accurate to me.
I would just have to say that it's not an artist's impression. The very traffic modelling that was used the very data that is the traffic modelling generates the visual image that you saw. Those vehicles moving were the vehicles that traffic modelling produces.
And the other point, sorry, I don't want to
No.
right
My
over you.
question was, are you satisfied that that traffic modelling is as robust as it should be?
I think indeed I said that.
If anything, it's pessimistic. If anything, they've added in more cars. The other point is, I think the crucial thing that Leon said towards the end of his presentation is that this is a further trigger for us to get on with the vital work of redistributing the traffic during the day. And we learnt during the Olympics that you can manage traffic better in London. It's perfectly obvious to all of us now that you've got the overwhelming bulk of deliveries and so on going on from 7 o'clock in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Are there better ways of managing that? TfL is leading that work. It is essential to do this redistribution of traffic anyway, but these cycle superhighways will act as a spur and a trigger to further action, and that is what London needs.
And I have 3 specific questions about how you're going to manage the disruption during the build phases.
Right. That is
how are you going to ensure that enforcement is there, both on the cyclist and on the motorists themselves, and accommodate the emergency vehicle points which they've clearly made? And 3, how are you going to deal with breakdowns after the superhighways are there? Breakdowns will happen. People will need to pull to the side to get out of the traffic ways.
I think these are reasonable questions. I think those are extremely reasonable questions. How about managing the build-out and stopping delays caused by breakdowns?
Firstly, just to say that the build programme is a very sophisticated one. It's designed to work alongside all of the other developments that are taking place in London. So, for example, the work on East-West Cycle Superhighway, if agreed, wouldn't start until after the City of Westminster is finished digging up Bridge Street. It wouldn't start until after the completion of this year's London Marathon. So we've got a very sophisticated build programme for all of it. It takes into account all the other developments in London. We have a thing called a playbook, which actually sets out hour by hour, day by day, the full effect of all the developments on the network. So we're able to see what the hotspots are, we're able to take mitigation about that. So I can assure you that the build programme is seamlessly built into everything we know about all other construction activities taking place in London. It's the same technique that we used during the Olympics, which very effectively proved where and when there would be strains on the network, either in terms of passenger numbers or in terms of vehicle numbers. So we're very satisfied that we've got a good build programme in place. As I said in my presentation, of course, we will be watching this like a hawk. We'll be watching using the CCTV that we have, using the people we've got out there, and we'll be making sure that if the effects are for some reason worse than we expected, which is always possible, then we will act immediately. And acting immediately might be to change what we were doing in the construction, it might be to suspend it whilst we work out what's going on, it might be to change the mitigation strategy, it could be a number of things. And we will watch it very, very carefully.
I hope that message is coming over loud and clear to interested parties, because we mean that sincerely. I do think it's important. I don't think we can have a test in advance, but what we're proposing is that there should be pari passu, that with the construction of the superhighway there should be continuous assessment of the impacts, and where we can vary the outcomes and make improvements, obviously we will.
And on the second point about vehicles that break down and so on, the biggest perturbations on the network tend to be caused by thoughtless, illegal parking, loading and unloading. Just stopping for 30 seconds.
That's enforcement, that's not breakdown.
I appreciate that. But most of the interruption on the network, the fact is, I'm afraid, that modern motor vehicles are very reliable, so breakdowns are relatively small. The biggest problem we've got is the enforcement of people doing things that they shouldn't do. However, no matter what the cause is, whether it's a breakdown or whether it's illegality, we are ramping up our enforcement activity. We'll have resources on hand, and frankly, we will deal with whatever happens on the network, especially in areas we know to be very sensitive. We'll be in there very quickly. For example, as you know, in respect to the bus operation, we have a recovery truck stationed in the centre of London. If a bus breaks down at a critical place, no matter whose bus it is, we go in and pull it out of the way so it doesn't impede the traffic flow. So we have lots of experience like that on the bus network. We have the same experience in the Blackwall Tunnel, where people thoughtlessly run out of fuel in the Blackwall Tunnel and cause a queue back to Hastings. So we will work really very hard to make sure that where there are sensitive parts on the network, we'll drag it out of the way and get the road cleared.
Charles.
I support the proposals. I think, as you do, we need to take a calculated risk, and there's some calculations of some depth gone on. I've got two queries for understanding. One is recommendation H, refers to things when a borough refuses to permit TfL to implement or construct. Is this about bricks and mortar, or is it about actually the principle? And then secondly, the Metropolitan Police Service, lots of comments from other organisations which clearly have an axe to grind, and quite rightly. The MPS, I see it in a slightly different vein, so I've given more consideration to what they say. And their response, which has been circulated, starts with overall the MPS supports the proposal, so that's where they start from. They then list 21 issues which range from the specific of particular junctions and bus shelters right the way through to the generality of emergency response time, which I find powerful and well thought through. This letter was written exactly 3 months ago. What's happened since? So 2 questions.
Yes.
Yes. What's the progress? And the other one is, what does that recommendation H actually mean?
Through recommendation H.
So recommend H refers to where TfL don't have other authorities to uphold these, and where another body has highway. We will require agreement with that to undertake the works on their road. If that borough chooses not to provide that agreement, then it will be down to the borough itself to undertake the works and actually do that. So it's about whether we form an agreement or not, and if we take over highway authority responsibility for the rest of the works.
But it's not about approval of the principle that it will happen, it's only who will do it.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
But clearly we need to negotiate with authorities.
Yeah.
Who have highway authority.
Okay, thank you.
While we were quickly looking up section H, we weren't entirely listening to the other question. Would you mind repeating it?
That's right. The MPS.
Yep.
How have you responded to the Met?
Yeah. So, as we would do with any major scheme that we're implementing, we always get detailed responses back on detail of the design. We continue to discuss with the MPS their points of concern. Many of those will be picked up within the design changes, but we will continue to work on the detail.
I mean, that's useful, but I think it would have been helpful, and I know it wasn't your request to circulate this letter, to see what has happened in the 3 months between November the 5th and February the 5th from such a key player as the MPS in terms of some of the really sort of meaty issues that they raise, like emergency response time and other things.
I think, if I may, the real answer is the same as the rest of the 20,000 consultees, which is that where they have made points, and a number of people have made significant points. So, if you look, for example, about emergency response times, the fact that we've been able to cut the delay minutes westbound by 6 means that concern on their part is significantly diminished, because actually we've managed to make the traffic work more freely. Now, there is a limit to what you can do, but actually, for those consultees who responded, actually the scheme as amended takes into account their points very largely. Now, that's not the end of it, because we'll continue to work with people like the police right through to implementation, and those are discussions in that particular case that we can have on a regular basis, if only because the person who wrote the response is actually part of the Traffic and Transport Command, with which we're dealing on a daily basis. You would expect them to respond comprehensively, and you'd also expect us to carry it through. But the general response to the substantive points made in every one of the 20,000 responses. We don't agree that there hasn't been time to read them. There has been time to read them. We've read them all, and what's in front of you responds to those general points.
I didn't say there hadn't been time to read the response.
I think what Charles wants is to see what we've got to say to each of the police's questions. I think it's a very legitimate question. I think actually it would be good for the benefit of the whole board if next time round the board was able to see exactly what we were saying about each of those points raised by the police. But as you rightly say, Charles, the police do begin very strongly by saying they support the scheme because it will improve safety. John.
Chairman, I have some difficulty with this for many of the reasons that Peter explained very clearly. The good intent behind this one cannot deny. If something is going to reduce the number of cyclists who are injured and killed on the roads in London, then that is a good objective to have. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I would say the biggest danger to cyclists on the roads in London are actually themselves. And the way in which many of them ride, one is surprised that in fact the number of accidents is not far larger, because it is an entirely different way of cycling to that which you see in many other cities. They may be the largest number of vehicles in the rush hour. They're certainly not the largest number of people trying to move around the road network in rush hour. And therefore, again, I think we have to recognise that what we're doing here is something for a minority of the city, not for the majority of the city. And we are doing it with a business case which, in fact, does not, to a large extent, work. And we are doing it in the face of the professional organisations who operate on the road network in London having very considerable reservations about this. The opinion polls are pretty valueless, quite frankly, because there is no explanation of who is actually responding. Without knowing where somebody is coming from when they respond to an opinion poll, then it's very difficult to take on board the support or non-support for a scheme. It's pretty well impossible for this board to actually act in any proper way in terms of governance in approving or otherwise the proposal. It is unrealistic to, in fact, give members of the board this volume of paper 3 or 4 days before a meeting and expect them to have any chance of digesting it, understanding it. You simply have to take it at face value, and I do take it at face value that the planners, the engineers and everybody else who prepared it have prepared it with the very best of intentions. I accept that they will have responded to consultation. I accept that they have tried to continue to work the quartz into the pine pot, which fundamentally we are trying to achieve here. And so I don't, I've no doubt people have put their very best efforts into doing, as they do all the time, and I am unstinting really in my support and praise of the TfL team in keeping London moving in the way they do on a day-to-day basis, because it is an enormous challenge. What I think this is doing is increasing the scale of that challenge.
That's certainly true.
For a minority. And
well,
that's what
okay.
worries
Let me
me
address that. And that's a very serious point, that this is although the number of vehicles in the peak maybe cyclists, as you rightly say, John, their cyclists do not form the majority of road users, because there will be many people in buses and cars and so on, more people, and that is entirely correct. I think I would make 2 points in reply. The first is that we think that particularly in the cases of the buses, the impact of these interventions will be very small. So the huge number of passengers on London buses won't be disadvantaged. And so add the bus passengers and the cyclists together. I think you've probably almost got a majority there, haven't you? We got a majority yet? You had the bus passengers and the cyclists together in numbers terms?
6.5.
Yeah, okay. Then if you add, if you take the thank you so much. Take the other constituents of road traffic, the HGVs, the vans, all those guys. Yes, they will experience some extra delay, but only a limited extra delay, and one that I think that TfL have done a heroic job of mitigating and reducing. I think with respect, I think you're underestimating the ability of the powerful minds of the board to absorb the information before them, and it comes down to this, John. Do you do something or don't you do it? Do you do something or don't you do it? That is what it boils down to. In the end, TfL have worked night and day to try and get in a segregated cycle superhighway east-west that does minimal damage to the interests of other road users. I think that they have succeeded. And the question is, do we go ahead? We could abandon it and just sort of go on with blue paint on the road. I don't think we could go back to blue paint on the roads for various legal reasons. So the choice is a clear one. Do you do something or do you do nothing? And I think I know what Londoners want. Overwhelmingly, they have shown in the polls and in the consultation that is what they want. And just to go back to your original point about the interests of this minority, I think backing cycling, backing cleaner, greener forms of transport, helping people to be secure in cycling and making use of bicycles rather than cars is in the interests of the whole city. I think it's an economic benefit for the whole of London, and we should be pursuing it. And I think the choice for the board is very, very clear, very clear indeed, and it's binary. Yes, Brendan. Well,
briefly respond.
Yes.
I accept your point. The point I'm making about governance is that in accepting this, I think we're accepting it simply on that basis of let's give it a go, on the basis that in the long term it could be beneficial to cycling in London. But I don't think that I don't think we should pretend that actually this is proper governance of making a decision in the normal way that you would do it. This is making a decision on the basis, as you've said, of a binary approach, which is do we do it or don't we? And I think if you really applied a considered analysis with all the economic benefits and otherwise all the challenges this is going to present in the face of the opposition of nearly every professional driving operation in the city, then you would pause before going ahead at this point. That's my point.
I really can't agree that there hasn't been proper consideration of this matter by TfL or indeed by the board. I think the board is not composed, to the best of my knowledge, of traffic engineers. They're composed of people who have a broad understanding of transport issues and who want to promote good transport solutions in London. I think that the issues are very clear. They're there before us. I mean, Howard, is there anything you want to say about this decision?
It is correct to say that we would ordinarily have taken an issue like this to the Finance Committee before it came to the board. But as we've already explained to members, we've brought it straight to the board in order to avoid any further delay in taking a decision. We have, I think this decision would ordinarily have involved a large amount of paper and explanation because of the public interest that there's been in it. We've gone to great lengths to be transparent about the reasoning and the developments in the project. Yes, it's a lot of paper. We've given the required statutory amount of time for that to be public, and we've also done the presentation in order to aid people to see where things are. So I don't think there's any issue in relation to governance in the sense that all the available information has been placed in front of members in the way that it would ordinarily be, whether that discussion was in more detail at the Finance Committee or
not. Roger, and then Brendan.
Very quickly, I wholeheartedly support the proposals. Just one specific, and I don't think we need to look too much further than the safety aspects that they bring. To that, I just asked Leon to expand on loading and unloading, because I think that is potentially a safety issue. The sorts of things we envisage helping make loading and unloading when it crosses a cycle lane safe.
Very happy to respond to that. Generally, I think firstly we said that we are, of course, working with the whole freight logistics industry about the times at which they're taking, they're occupying the carriageway at all, to start with. And then we're working closely with frontages and businesses to understand the needs of the loading and unloading that they need at those locations. We are moving away from a one-size-fits-all blanket loading and unloading rule across the whole of London. We're moving away from consistency. We're moving toward what it is that people want. As an example of that, away from the cycle superhighway, what used to be Woolworths is now Waitrose in the Edgware Road. Waitrose would like to deliver that store at 5 o'clock in the morning, but in fact can't, because the loading bay isn't enforced until 7 o'clock in the morning. So the Waitrose truck has, until recently, been hanging around to come into London with the morning peak, so as it can take out one of the lanes of the Edgware Road towards Marble Arch. As a result of working closely with the organisation, we're now able to change the loading bay on that, because it's in their interest as well. They'd like to be there. They'd like to be in and out early. We'd like them to be in and out early, and we can make provision for that when we understand it. And then, Roger, finally, there is the issue about safely loading and unloading across the cycle superhighway. And again, we're working really very hard to deal with anybody who's got a frontage facing the cycle superhighway to make sure that we understand exactly what it is they need and see what it is that we can provide. We showed some on the fly-through. We showed some lay-bys where some facilities will be made, and there are some issues to do with logistics. There's also some issues about wheelchair passengers leaving taxis, and also from coaches, where again we're working hard to make sure that it's safely possible, where legally possible to do so, for goods or passengers to come out of vehicles and move across the cycle superhighway. In some cases, that's about building it up to the pavement level so that it's flat. In some cases, it's about making sure there's a provision somewhere nearby. We would repeat that we are literally knocking on all the doors of all of the frontages and anybody who has business that's affected by this to see that we understand what it is they need, so that we can attempt to accommodate it to their satisfaction.
These changes are being accompanied by the largest effort in travel demand management as far as freight and logistics are concerned that we've made since the Olympics, and that will be a continuing programme, Vernon.
Good. Sorry. Thanks. Are you happy there, Roger? But Brendan, and then Daniel and Michael.
I mean, I'm attracted by the proposals of others have been. It does represent a very positive vision for a major transformation of the way the road network works. A huge number of positive features, but I have to say I reflect the concerns that some other colleagues have articulated about the way in which the board is being pressed to make this decision today. Howard says it's not been through the normal processes of consideration by organs of the board, the Surface Panel or the FPC, because we don't want any delay. But this is a very important decision, and being seen to make it, having fully considered all the representations that are coming in our direction, seems to me to suggest that it ought to have had that proper consideration. Can I just say as well, I'm very sceptical of the argument that it isn't possible to trial key aspects of these proposals. Some of the major public policy blunders of successive governments down the ages, a very good book by a bloke called Anthony King, one key factor in those huge blunders which have caused massive economic costs and social costs too, has been the failure to look for appropriate trialling of new proposals. And I'm sure that the creativity and talent of the TfL team could indeed find some reasonable way of trialling key aspects of these proposals. So you presented it, Mayor, as we're going to do it or we're not going to do it. Is there not a third way which is, yes, to allow some delay in order that the representations that have been made can receive a proper response. Key aspects of the work leading up to this have only just been published. The business case, the environmental impact assessment, only just been published literally within days of this meeting, that they can be properly considered and be seen to have been properly considered, and to allow the FPC and the Surface Panel to consider of that
there's a bit of nonsense here about the
before
FPC.
the board makes a final decision.
Well, there's a bit of nonsense, if I may say so, about the FPC and the Surface Panel. The Surface Panel, I don't think, as far as I know, would normally consider this in any event. The reason it didn't go to the FPC was because there was a question of conflict, as I understand it, with the chair of the SPC, of the FPC. So that's why we've done it as we have. And look, I think that, to get back to your point about the trial, I don't think this is feasible. We didn't trial the Olympic route management because we couldn't trial it. We just had to get on and do it. And what we will do, as I've said earlier on, is we will evaluate the progress of the scheme as it goes, and we'll make sure that if we are running into unexpected problems, then we will address those as we go. Leon, is there anything you want to add to
Only
that?
to say that in governance terms, it of course has been through the Surface Transport Board, and on the record, IPAG says that this is a well-run project.
Good. Good. Daniel.
And we wouldn't ordinarily take it to Surface Panel, but we would ordinarily take it to the Finance
Mr. Mayor, I've been involved in many schemes over the last 15 years to improve facilities for cycling, but I've also taken quite a strong interest in improving the amenity of pedestrians, and they haven't been mentioned so far. I would just like Leon to have a moment to say, first of all, that there will be no disbenefit to pedestrians from these proposals. In fact, I hope you'll be able to say there will be concomitant benefits, and whether Living Streets and appropriate organisations have had any concerns they might have expressed taken into account as other consultees have sought.
First to say, as we showed in, I think, the picture of Apex, the whole urban realm and the facilities for pedestrians is greatly enhanced as a result of the changes to the streetscape that Cycle Superhighway brings. There are the issues, of course, of pedestrians at bus stops, where the current design standard has floating bus stops where there's carriageway width, effectively where the segregated cycleway runs behind the bus stop. Of course, bus passengers, to get to and from the stop, have to cross the Cycle Superhighway. We already have that on the extension of Cycle Superhighway 2 between Bow and Stratford, and we've been filming the video evidence there, and there has been no real conflict between pedestrians and cyclists in that area. And in fact, what we have is far more sophisticated than is typical in other countries. In many cases where cyclists and pedestrians are mixed, there's almost no segregation arrangement. Where what we have is quite extensive. So we generally believe that the arrangements for pedestrians are improved. They're certainly improved as far as junctions are concerned. They're certainly improved in terms of access are concerned. And all the work that we've had on segregated cycle superhighways so far, including bus stops, shows that there has been absolutely no worsening in events involving pedestrians, and in general, pedestrians welcome the new environment that they have. All of that, of course, is predicated on good behaviour by all road users, including cyclists on the cycling superhighway. And our general view is that the arrangements for pedestrians are, in general, improved, and certainly, specifically, never worsened.
I didn't see, and I'm glad to say, I didn't see on your video presentations any additions of guardrails to direct pedestrians to defined crossings, so they will still be able to cross the carriageway with the ease and freedom they're entitled to as free-born Englishmen, etc., etc., in this great capital city. And I applaud that. This requires no response, Leon.
I'm happy to give you one because in my past I was part of the bill team that delivered the Highways Act 1980, in which the freedom of the Queen's subject to pass and repass was renewed, as it has been, as it was in common law, as it was renewed by various highway legislation in 1884, 1959, 1962, and 1980. And I'm very glad to continue speaking as a prolific user of the whole road network myself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you, Mayor. A few points on modelling and the film. I'm not a traffic modeller, a traffic engineer, but I have been, and I've visited the team that does the traffic modelling, and I have seen examples where that sort of simulation is run on a split screen with real film, and I've seen that it is uncannily accurate. Of course, that film didn't show breakdowns and people stopping to get a Starbucks and so on, but it is surprisingly accurate. With respect to the question of could it be trialled, one observation is I've also visited with the team that does things like traffic light timings, and I find it very hard to believe that one could do a trial with all of the concomitant details that you would need to change, and then and do that on a sort of ad hoc basis, because this stuff is really complicated. Any other board members want to visit those teams, they should, because it's complicated. A couple of things, though. Since I do share the concerns about governance, but I think if there's going to be a discussion about governance, then it needs to be a complete discussion. And you placed on the record the point that the reason it didn't go to the Finance Committee is because of the conflict, not because of the timing. And I think you also talked about the orchestration of letter campaigns, the evidence of which is in the bundle of letters that was placed before the board for this meeting. And so I think, in terms of governance, I sort of think it's a kind of it's a 3-all draw, and I certainly feel completely capable. That's why I think board members are here on the board, of reading materials, tracking them through numbers of iterations over a long period, and coming to a view. So that's where I come out on the governance issues. In terms of the cost benefit, I think my colleague Roger's already talked about safety. And I think that is, at the end of the day, I personally place more weight on the safety issues than the dollar and cents or pound numbers. So I think that the fact that safety is improved, to me, is incredibly important. I also note that some of the support...
It's not just about safety, it's about boosting cycling in London.
I was going to get on to the benefits. I was also noted that some of the benefits around health and some of the supporting letters, in fact, I think 11 health organisations were amongst those supporting the proposals, and I think that's very significant. What's not in the cost benefit is also what I see as I travel around to different cities around the world, is that cities compete on their urban realm more and more, and they attract the growth industries of the future are populated by people who want to see this sort of stuff happen. That's why companies in the tech sector have been supportive of this, although of course that's another letter writing campaign that was encouraged by other players. But it is notable who has supported and who hasn't. And finally, just coming back to the point about the fact that it is somewhat, I hate to say it, somewhat rushed and some of the plans are not in place and so on, what I'd like to finish with is a question to Leon. As you respond, as you roll this out, of course you will respond as quickly as possible, your brilliant team and so on. What will you put in place? Will you put in place anything special to get input from those who have concerns on a rolling basis? Is there going to be a rapid response so that some of those valid concerns of the sort of driving organisations, if it manifests at a junction or of the particular behaviour, that you actually keep the lines open to them more than you would normally?
We absolutely, Mike, that's very helpful. We absolutely undertake that over and above the activities that we'll be undertaking in terms of enforcement, policing, vigilance using CCTV cameras, people on the ground, and so on, that we would welcome and indeed encourage comments from anybody who appears to be affected by the construction and indeed the implementation of any of these cycle superhighways to come forward with their points, come forward with their evidence, enter into dialogue with us about what the consequences are, and we undertake to respond to those to the best of our ability, and where those points are found to be valid, we'll modify what we're doing accordingly.
Can't say fairer than that. Good. Any other points, comments, queries, outbreaks of spontaneous jubilation, applause?
Can I just say for the record, if you
yes,
have taken
Howard.
those proposals to the FPC, that this paper was not ready in time for the FPC. If it had have been, if we'd waited for the next FPC, we'd have had to wait for the next board. So it was to avoid the additional 6 weeks delay, which is why we brought it to this board meeting.
Right. But there's no reason why we shouldn't take it to this board meeting, is there?
No.
But what would have been the cost of that 6-week delay? Taking that little bit longer, what would have been the huge downside of taking a little bit longer?
We would, in answer, I mentioned earlier there's a really sophisticated build programme for this and all of the other schemes in London. So, for example, the start, although I said that East West starts in April, taking into account the works at Bridge Street and so on, some of the other ones start sooner. If there had been a delay, then we would have had to have gone away and completely revised the construction and implementation programme in order to deliver it.
Okay, good. Any further points anybody wishes to raise?
You'll be interested to know that whilst we've been having the discussion, there's been a collision between a National Express coach and a cyclist at Marble Arch. Fortunately, the cyclist is not badly injured.
Right. And good. Well, that is exactly the kind of very sad occurrence that these proposals are designed to obviate, but they go further because what we are trying to do is improve the quality of life for everybody in this city, and I think that will be the outcome. I know that it is. It looks like something that some motorists, and it's only going to be some motorists, will find initially painful to a very small degree, in a degree that has been very substantially mitigated by TfL's interventions and changes and improvements to the scheme. But I think overwhelmingly that it's the right thing to do for this city, and I hope very much that it carries the support of the board. And I'm going to ask the board formally to note the paper and approve the procurement and project authority for the proposed cycle superhighways. Can I have the boards
and the other matters
and all the other matters contained hereunder. Thank you very much. Thank you. We move on to item 8, which is taxi and private hire licence fees.